family, friends, colleagues, people who are on this journey, their plight not only in Pakistan but the world over. After spending so many hours and burning so much of midnight oil, is this the road that she actually wants to walk on, lead us to? Does she wake up every morning and sleep every night with a sense that this has been an extraordinarily wonderful day? So I think, with your permission, and what makes sense to me is that we begin by asking Aisha a few questions, and then she reads a little bit from her book, and then Rukshanda is going to talk about her work, which is fascinating work for the women. I would probably say that, in a manner of speaking, in KP, but of course it relates to women everywhere. I'm sure some of you will be able to find similarities in people you know, or cases you've heard of that you know. And then, of course, we must ask our publisher, who's come all the way from Delhi, to, of course, wind up the afternoon. So that's the way. And of course, if anybody wants to add comments at the end, there will be time, a few minutes, where anybody wants to add a comment or ask a question or maybe asks for some elaborations from Aisha. So that's how informal I was thinking of making, if that's all right with everybody. So Aisha, the first question that I have is, how do you carry on after reading, and this not only relates to her, but to me and to Rukshanda and to everybody here. How do we carry on with our normal lives after reading about a 5-year-old raped and the body thrown somewhere or the other, or the bombing of a girls' school, as Rukshanda is very familiar with, or a young couple being shot for honor just because they wanted to get married and their lives have been snuffed out? How do you carry on? How do we carry on? What messages do you have for us?
Thank you, Mrs. Hashmi. And before I start, thank you to everybody who is here today. It's a great honor that you made time and that you came. I'm very grateful. Mrs. Hashmi, your question about, how does one carry on when everything on the horizon is so bleak? There are always two things that you can do with the experience that one has. One of them is that you can choose to be overpowered by it, and the second is that you choose to do something about it. And I think that a time came in my life, as a time comes in a lot of people's life, where they make that choice about what it is that they want to do. Do they want to contribute to the overall questions or the overall cause, or do they want to let life kind of overwhelm them and have its sort of own ebb and flow? And I think my decision came when I felt that my writing, good or bad, gifted or not, was a tool for me to express angst about what happens. And I think that that's sort of the first step in understanding the broader context of what requires change. So that's what I did. I just sort of picked up my pen and ranted. This is what it is. It's just a slightly more organized form of a rant. But that's what I did.
From what I read in the book, the language is very hard hitting, as it were. No holds barred. And that's very unlike the Aisha Sarwari I know, who's gentle and soft and pretty. So what is this? This is a complete contradiction, really, in a manner of speaking. And I can say that now sometimes I find that, if I may just digress a bit with the poetry of my father, the gentlest of men, and some of his poems are the hardest of poems. So how is it that you balance your softness or your soft appearances, and yet there is so much anger and frustration? Which one is the real Aisha, actually?
I think it's an accurate observation. Sometimes people ask me, did you really write that? So we go through society and our external environment with a lot of masks on our faces. There's a mask for our professional life, there's a mask for our familial life, there's one for, the public life. And I felt that writing is this one thing that enabled me to shed those sort of, external filters out and kind of dish them out and be free. I think freedom is one of the most valued and prized, and it's a luxury too to have it. So I could, through my writing, enable my spirit and my anger to kind of go forth and express itself.
You have two wonderful, beautiful young daughters. And I think the first thing that a mother does is immediately somehow put everything that she has into the futures of her children. What future do you see for Zainab and Zoya?
Well, I hope and I pray that the future is bright. And part of my journey to pick up the pen had everything to do with Zainab and Zoya. It had everything to do with the fact that what are they going to inherit? What world will they inherit? And even if they inherit a bad world, what would they know their mother to have fought through? You know, what would, I mean, would I be a passerby, a mere observer, or would I be somebody who protested? And I really wanted them to know when I'm gone that their mother protested and their mother didn't take it lying down. And so that is precisely why I wrote. In fact, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because when I was planning the book launch, I asked my elder daughter, Zoya, what do you think I should say? Because I have no idea what I'm going to say. And she immediately got to her computer and sent me this speech, which I have right in front of me. And with your permission, if it's okay, I'd like to read it. And it answers the question about how young girls see the world. So the title is Speech, brackets, professionally clears throat.
Instructions.
Thank you everyone for joining us here. Women disempowerment is an important issue to be discussed. In most of the societies in the world, men are kind of superior to women. In our country, women disempowerment rates are quite high, mainly because of gender discrimination. Gender discrimination commonly takes place in the workplace or at school. At work, women are given less difficult tasks to perform just because they're female, and people think that they can't handle hard work. That is stupid. Look at Helen Keller. Despite being blind and deaf, she was successful than more people she was competing with, and she was a woman. At school, girls are told to limit themselves by their in comparison to their male classmates. 70% of them actually do. They underestimate themselves, which is a terrible thing to do. I personally think that this can lead to suicide. I believe that the female society is powerful, unstoppable, and born to shine. There is also another issue which I call girl-on-girl hate. This is when girls and women start disempowering each other, and as a result of gender discrimination which they have faced. The female population should stick together and fight their way out of gender discrimination. With this, I'd like to conclude two things. Men are not superior to women, and girl-on-girl hate is wrong.
Well done.
She assured me that this was her own work, and she assured me that she'd worked hard at it and she'd thought about the points first.
Thank you, Zoya. I love the kind of superior. I mean, the kind of superior. And I'd love to have a discussion with her afterwards about what is kind of superior. And this just reminds me of a simple thing that she's so right about this. You know, I have a young granddaughter at home, and one day she wanted to go to the Koka, in a small little place outside. And I said, come, let's go. And she looked at me and says, are we going alone? I said, excuse me? Just you and me? I said, who else do you want to come? We don't want to take, I mean, she was trying to express that, do we take a man with us, of sorts? And then she realized that she's asking the wrong person. But I mean, it wasn't at this, I mean, I had a few words with the mother, obviously, afterwards. But she said, I never told her. So these thoughts are ingrained, as you know, in the children, and it's very wrong, and so forth, fine. Would you like to read just something from the book, and then we'll just move on to Rukshandra, because I think we'd like to hear about what she has to do.
So I've written about 20-30 of these articles in this book, and it was difficult to choose which one. I was spoiled by choices because there's so many great women who've done amazing things. I had commentary on Afia Siddiqui and Asia Bibi. I had commentary on Shameen Umair Chinoy's work on saving face with asset women. I wrote a piece on your mother, Alice Faiz. I wanted to read that because it's so relevant today, and perhaps if we have time, we'll read it. But because Narendra ji is here, I wanted to also give it a bit of an India-Pakistan context about why is it that I rejected that some women were okay to put down and some women were the holy cow to be respected. And I spoke up about the issue of one of the Indian stars who acted in an ad and then was later condemned. So the first one I'd like to read is called When Politicians Give Green Signals to Rape. On a TV show discussing if child marriages are kosher, I realized I should have not been there in the first place. It was like discussing if waterboarding, maiming, or beheadings were a laudable method of bringing societal change. There can be no discussion when one party justifies violence of any kind using any stretch of excuses or beliefs. Child marriages are violence. Things eventually got worse, as they inevitably do on talk shows. A political party representative, a man, brought up a Pakistani film actress, Meera, and said that he didn't want a country where women like her defined standards of morality. Every girl child is coached to slouch, hide under the covers, ignore gropes and eve teases, and beware of the passions of men who, after all, will be men. Well, it's time to expect men to be more than invertebrates. Let's demand that those who are grow a spine.
Thank you. Like I said, hard hitting. I'd like to now invite Rukshanda Naz, if it's okay.
Thank you, and thank you for so much acknowledgement. Actually, whenever people ask about my work, so I always say I started work from home. Then I started my legal career in '91 when I got my degree from Peshawar University. So again, I faced a family jirga whether I should work outside in the legal profession or not. So that was my second turning point where I decided, and I faced that jirga. So both the things, basically, I can say after when I started practically work in my for women, so my own experience helped me a lot to understand what women of Pakistan wants and how what are our issues as a feminist. So sometime I say I was born feminist. I didn't realize, but I was born feminist. And then the second strength I draw from our own women, particularly because I was very fond of history. So the first time when the Chand Bibi, she raised her voice in Mohammedan educational conference, and the Women in Women Action Forum, because the Women in Action Forum in Lahore, when we were looking, women are very active and they are on the road. So it was basically, we were just thinking how it's possible for women. And I still remember when first time in '93, I came to Aurat Foundation Lahore office. No doubt I was working in a law profession, and in entire building I was the only woman, because we were 17 girls in law college, and I continue with the profession because rest of my colleagues, they went in teaching and different profession, but not in the law. So when I saw women outside their home, because we were familiar with women in our culture, women were working in the field, they were fetching water and collecting votes, working in the field, but not women on a different position, which are considered to be very powerful and decision-making forums for women. So somehow in Pakistan we have to work under certain realities. Women will do and they are contributing in the field of poetry. There is a change in our dramas and in our fiction, and of course at certain level, because I want to conclude on this. For example, the one success indicator for me is, no doubt we have lesser school, no doubt we have lesser opportunity in our area, but our girl literacy rate is increasing as compared to our own family male members. Thank you.
Do you find a reason for optimism, even though it looks a little dark, looking at the back and then comparing to, because you're a researcher? Very quickly.
No, very quickly, two examples. Women issues are on the political agenda now, on the state policies. No doubt the state policies are weak or strong. And the recent example, where in North Waziristan, according to the UN OCHA data, 21% women, they register as head of the household. So you can see from the top to the down. So there are changes, and your earlier statement is very much relevant. No doubt, if we are looking on a situation is not good, but we see increasing number of women girls hostels, increasing of women in a different sectors. So I think this is the change, and no one can stop this change.
Before I ask our friend from across the border to wind up, would anybody like to share some thoughts?
It's actually a little bit more complicated, I think. A year ago, I was in Lahore at the invitation of the CM there, who is very passionate and very active, at least compared to the other CMs that I've had the pleasure of meeting on the women's empowerment agenda. And I listened to him speak, and one of the things that struck me then was that, and you mentioned this, there are many women in medical schools, in engineering. They far outnumber the men. Their test scores are also better. So, and in spite of the government pumping in lots of money on education, investing, and saying that by education itself is going to bridge that gender gap. But what seems to be happening is that many of these women do go to colleges in greater numbers, they're enrolling, they're graduating, but then they're not making it into the workforce. So something is happening between graduation and dropping out. And you have this whole phenomenon of doctor brides and stay-at-home engineers, and so enormous talent pool there being lost.
The more men are on a pedestal, and when they advocate for women's rights, I think that the amplification is much more than when women do it. And so, I'm grateful to all men who are here today and who've always, supported other women. Obviously, one of the things that I say about men is, it's very important when you're raising your daughters to kind of raise them in a way that's no different from how you'd raise boys. So that's, I think, one of the biggest contributions that you can make. But your second question, I think, alluded to the translation of women from medical school into the workforce.
It's more
Everywhere.
how do you get from education
To working.
to
Taking on a
working,
Yeah.
if that's your choice.
Right. I think I'll point out to what Nadia Naviwala, my friend here, said, which she researches education in Pakistan quite in depth. She said that there's a huge difference between education in Pakistan and learning. Our children go to school, but they're given a very sort of rudimentary understanding of what it is to learn, but they're not given those life skills or those conceptual understanding. I think you can attest to this, that wo taaleem ke saath tarbiyat nahi hai. You kind of like learning the basics of the ABC and the 1 2 3, but you're not understanding your role as an individual in society. And so that's why we see that women don't join the workforce as much as this should. That's why we see that they're not financially that independent. We see them as inhibited, and we see men as catalysts to that inhibition.
The corporate culture does not allow women of my age to go in the field again, because my experience is different. My experience from the work field is very low, but my experience as a woman, as a person, is very high. So I become a conflict in the workspace. So I give interviews in all because I'm a telecom engineer. I go to the telecom is supposed to be the best area, the most progressed, and still I cannot find a job. Because you see the conflict of working women and educated women who was at home taking care of her kids, and now she's ready to bounce back into a career. It's not as easy as you think.
It's not as easy.
Effort hai, great effort, and I hope you'll go places even after this, and this will be the first of many such ventures. आपसे 3 सवाल हैं.
Oui. बच्चों.
Yes.
बच्चों.
Why feminism and not feminisms? Because Pakistan में एक feminism नहीं है, several feminisms हैं. Urban women versus rural women, formal sector working women versus non-formal sector working women. और दूसरा सवाल और भी मुश्किल है इससे. Choice of word fight. ये fight by fight क्यों है, ये struggle by struggle क्यों नहीं है, issue by issue क्यों नहीं है, case by case क्यों नहीं है. 100 किस्म के अल्फाज इस्तेमाल किए जा सकते थे. Navigating Pakistani feminism, struggle by struggle. Fight का जो लफ्ज़ है, between you and me and the lamppost secretly, मैं शायद मान जाऊं कि yes it is a fight. तो हम तो peace movement में हैं. Feminist women are in the vanguard of the peace movement. We don't want to be in the vanguard of the war movement and the war industry. So fight by fight का जो लफ्ज़ है उसका तासुर एक मनफी तासुर देता है. और तीसरी चीज़, ये सबसे मुश्किल सवाल है.
अभी और मुश्किल.
When you were responding to Mr. Jamshed Qazi, or Dr. Jamshed Qazi, I'm sorry, Doctor, I kept waiting for you to say it's patriarchy that's stopping the doctor and graduates, the engineers. Our friend here, the ex-working engineer. It's not a question of lack of talim ya tarbiyat, ya lack of talim hai, lack of tarbiyat, ya attitude towards work. I think no woman doctor would like to sit at home and waste 6 years of hard education and hard work. I think it's the patriarchal culture, especially her in-laws. मेरी बीवी तो काम नहीं करती. मैं बेगैरत आदमी हूँ कि मेरी बीवी काम करेगी. Am I such a dishonorable man that I will permit my wife to work? So, 3 difficult questions, I apologize.
Haraba, thank you so much for the questions. I think they're all very relevant and limitations at all fronts. And you're right, perhaps feminism is a good idea. I'm not sure grammatically if that will work, but I get your point. I get your point, and we'll probably do that for the next book. Your second comment about fight by fight. I am very addicted and very protective about fight by fight, and I'll tell you the reason. The reason is women are considered and acceptable when they're passive, and I reject that notion. And the reason for that is that when Marilyn French said that there's a war on women, I feel that we can't move ahead until we recognize that we are being killed, we are being raped, we are being maimed, we are being put behind, we are being let out of school, we are being, there's feticide. There is violence against women in the household and at the workplace. When we acknowledge all of those things, then struggling against them will not do, I think. I think fighting against them would do. So that's why I chose that title. And your third point about patriarchy, I completely agree with you. Absolutely.
It's one of the reasons.
Patriarchy is one of the reasons.
I'm so glad that there are youngsters here who still believe in that fight, youngsters left and right, and of course extreme right, who believe in that fight, and we have to do this, And I think it's wonderful that perhaps, I say it to myself, whether I want to include that or not, I don't know, but the seniors, the senior citizens around feel that, been there, done it, let them do it, but wouldn't you like to do it in this way? No. Oh, all right, okay.
I'm coming directly from Khyber Agency, Bara, where I wasn't given any security clearance, but I still made it. And we had lost one of our best beneficiaries and her family, her husband, and her 4-year-old child in a suicide bomb attack. So I had to go and condole on behalf of all of us. So I'm happy that I'm here, and Auntie, I'm happy that you're sitting here too. I love the title because I feel that it is a fight. And I've been, I'm 43. My fight for this has been a long one, but specifically in my political years, which I calculated has now reached 8 long years. It feels like much longer because we've been doing a lot of things. But one by one, I like the title, and I read a little bit the book on the way, on the motorway, the extracts that Aisha sent me, and I can associate with it. And I have traveled the length and breadth of this country watching that fight. That fight has been going on for generations and centuries, but we have been part of that fight. We're part of that process. I like to call it a process, and hopefully we're making a positive contribution in the resolution of that fight. But I'm going to end now by saying I'm glad I drove Well, I won't say I was speeding, but I think I was. I'm glad I drove back for this event. I really wish Aisha all the best, and I hope that we're going to see this book not just in the bookshops, but in terms of literature, in terms of substance. I'd like references made to it, and hopefully we'll see people like Aisha in Parliament one day. So not so far away. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
First book, I have enjoyed publishing it because I learned still more about feminism. Long time ago, when I started my career, I was probably the only male publisher in the world who had a feminist publishing house. The reason for me to be interested in the subject that I have lived feminism through the experience of my mother, who belonged to Dera Ghazi Khan. She did go up to school, and she used to wear a chadar. And then I suddenly found when she came to Delhi, of course with the family, and as I grew up, she had given up the chadar altogether, and she became a great feminist in terms of education of all her daughters and her granddaughters. So that is the purpose for which I am into publishing feminist books. So I would like that each of us, men particularly, should in our own way try and promote feminism, not only in Pakistan, but everywhere else also. Thank you for all of you being here. I hope I will have more occasions to meet you all again. Thank you.
The book and for giving feminist literature a voice. There have been much more amazing writers than me, but I'm so glad that you were able to amplify whatever I had written, and I'm very, very pleased and grateful. They say that behind every successful woman there's a man. So yes, of course, there's my husband. But more than my husband, my mother-in-law was a great support for me throughout my... and the publisher. So I wanted to request her to please come up here and just give token of appreciation to the panelists, please. Marvi, please, if you could come and see. Sorry about the gift bags, they're a little gaudy.